The wind was merciless. It clawed at Jacob's face, sharp as broken glass, and each breath felt like swallowing needles. Snowflakes, thick and heavy, whirled through the air like an endless curtain. They buried the ground, erased his footprints, and stole away any sense of direction. The planet was nothing but ice and silence, and Jacob felt as if it wanted him dead. He pulled his jacket tighter around himself, though the fabric was already stiff with frost. The crash had torn through most of his supplies. His crew, his friends, were gone. He had searched the wreckage for days, hoping, praying to hear voices calling back to him. But the only sound he ever found was the howling of the storm. Now he wandered with nothing but a half-empty pack, a cracked visor, and the faint hope that maybe somewhere there was shelter. Jacob had never known cold like this. Earth's winters were nothing compared to Rhea, this frozen alien world. Every step sank deep into the snow. Each movement drained his strength, and his body screamed for warmth. He tried not to think of sleep because he knew that in this place sleep meant death. Then through the haze of white, he saw movement. At first he thought it was a trick of the storm, a shadow shifting in the snow. But then the shape grew clearer. Tall, slender, walking with a strength that defied the storm. She wore furs made from some beast Jacob didn't recognize. The hides wrapped around her long frame in thick layers. Her skin was pale, not pale like human flesh, but shining faintly, silver like moonlight. Her hair was long and dark, tied back, but strands whipped free in the wind. Her eyes were the most striking, violet glowing faintly, like embers in the night. They locked onto Jacob, sharp and unblinking. Jacob froze in his tracks. His body was shaking from cold, but now it shook from fear too. This was no human. This was no survivor from his crew. The figure stopped a few paces away. The storm screamed around them, but she stood as if it was nothing more than a passing breeze. For a moment, neither moved. The alien woman studied him with a gaze that carried both suspicion and curiosity, as though she was deciding if he was real or worth saving. Finally, she spoke. Her voice cut through the storm, low and commanding. "You will follow." The words struck him with more force than the wind. Her language was strange, but somehow Jacob understood it as if it pressed directly into his mind. He wanted to ask who she was. He wanted to ask if she was going to kill him. But his lips were too frozen, his throat too dry. Instead, Jacob nodded. She turned without another word and began walking. Her long steps carried her smoothly across the snow. Jacob stumbled behind her, dragging his feet, every muscle screaming for rest. He didn't know where she was leading him, and part of him feared it was toward his death. But another part, the desperate, starving, freezing part, clung to the chance of warmth, of shelter, of not being alone anymore. The storm grew wilder as they climbed a ridge. Snow lashed against Jacob's face, blinding him. His legs buckled, and he fell to his knees, gasping. He looked up through blurred vision, and the alien woman was there, standing tall above him. For a moment he thought she would leave him behind, but instead, she reached down and gripped his arm with surprising strength. Her hand was warm, shockingly warm, through the layers of fur. "Stand," she ordered. Jacob forced himself up. His whole body ached, but her grip held steady, unyielding. Slowly, step by step, they pressed forward until the storm began to thin. At last, she led him to the mouth of a cave carved into the side of a black cliff. Inside, a faint light glowed, a fire. Smoke curled into the air and warmth touched his frozen skin. Jacob nearly wept as he stumbled inside. The woman released his arm and stood near the fire, her violet eyes watching him closely, as though measuring his worth. She said nothing at first, letting the silence stretch, letting him feel the strange weight of her presence. Then she spoke again, her voice steady and cold. "You are human," she said. The word sounded like both a question and an accusation. Jacob swallowed hard. His lips were cracked, his voice barely more than a whisper. "Yes," he answered. "Human, and lost." For the first time, something flickered across her face. Not warmth, not kindness, but recognition. Her eyes narrowed, and she stepped closer, her shadow falling over him. "You are not supposed to be here," she said. Jacob shivered. Not from the cold this time, but from the weight of her words. The cave was warmer than Jacob had imagined, but not by much. The fire at the center flickered weakly, its smoke curling up through a crack in the stone ceiling. Animal hides lay scattered on the ground, thick and rough, carrying the sharp smell of blood and smoke. Jacob collapsed near the fire, stretching out his frozen hands. The heat stung his skin at first, but slowly life crept back into his fingers. The woman did not sit. She stood tall at the edge of the firelight, her violet eyes fixed on him. Her face was carved in stone, sharp and unreadable. He felt like prey under her gaze, and yet, he knew if she wanted him dead, she would have left him outside. Finally, she spoke. "You should not be alive." Jacob coughed, his throat raw. "Believe me, I've been asking myself the same thing." She tilted her head, studying him. "Your kind burns fast in the cold, fragile, weak." Her words cut, but Jacob didn't argue. He was fragile here, weak here. Without her, he'd already be a frozen corpse. "Then why save me?" he asked, his voice soft, trembling not just from the cold, but from fear. Her eyes narrowed. She did not answer right away. Instead, she turned, pulling a strip of dried meat from a shelf carved into the rock wall. She tossed it toward him. Jacob caught it clumsily and stared. The meat was dark, tough, and smelled bitter. He hesitated, but hunger roared inside him. He bit down, nearly gagging at the taste, but forced himself to chew. "You eat," she said simply, "or you die." Jacob nodded. He ate in silence, watching her move around the cave. Every motion was efficient, practiced. She added wood too. The fire sharpened a bone blade, checked the hides drying against the wall. She lived here like someone who had no one else. Alone, hardened, yet unbroken. At last, she sat across from him, her back straight, her eyes never softening. "My name is Sarai," she said. Jacob swallowed the last bite of meat and tried to speak around the dryness in his throat. "Jacob. Jacob," she repeated, as if tasting the word, testing its weight. Then her gaze grew colder again. "You are human. The city speaks of you. Strangers from the sky. They said you would not last a single night." "Maybe they were right," Jacob admitted, glancing at the fire. "If not for you, I'd be dead out there." Her eyes flickered. Just a flicker, quickly hidden. She leaned closer, her voice lower now, though still edged with command. "Do not mistake this for kindness. I need warmth. You burn hot. That is why I let you stay." Jacob looked up at her, confused. "Warmth? You will see," she said, her tone final, shutting the door on further questions. The silence stretched, broken only by the crackle of fire and the distant howl of wind outside the cave. Jacob shifted closer to the flames, but the cold still gnawed at his bones. His teeth rattled, his whole body shaking despite the shelter. He tried to hide it, but Sarai's eyes caught everything. She rose suddenly, her tall figure casting a long shadow over him. Jacob tensed as she approached, unsure if she meant to strike him or throw him back into the snow. Instead, she stopped just above him, her gaze steady and commanding. "You will freeze before dawn," she said. "Into my bed. Now." Jacob blinked, stunned. "Wait, what?" Her voice sharpened. "Do not argue, human. The storm will kill you, the cold will kill me. We survive or we die. Together." Jacob's heart pounded. He had never heard words spoken with such authority, such absolute certainty. He looked past her to the furs piled high against the wall. The idea made his face burn, but the cold gnawed deeper, reminding him that shame meant nothing if he was dead. He swallowed hard. "All right." She did not smile, did not show relief. She only turned and walked toward the bed of hides, pulling aside layers to make space. She moved like a queen commanding her throne, her every step echoing control. Jacob followed slowly, his body trembling, though now it was not only from the cold. When he lay down, the furs swallowed him in rough, musky warmth. Then Sarai joined him, sliding close with no hesitation, no shame. Her body pressed against his and he froze, his breath caught in his chest. Her skin was not just warm, it was fire. Heat poured from her, sinking into him, thawing his frozen veins. She wrapped an arm around him with a strength that left no room for refusal. "Your kind burns hot," she murmured, almost to herself. "Good. You will keep me alive." Jacob's voice shook, barely audible. "You mean, we'll keep each other alive?" For the first time her face shifted, not much, just a flicker, a tiny crack in the stone mask she wore. Confusion, maybe even a hint of pain. She turned her head away, hiding whatever emotion had broken through. Neither spoke after that. The storm outside raged like a beast, clawing at the cave walls. But inside, wrapped in heat and silence, Jacob's shivering eased. His breathing slowed. For the first time since the crash, he felt something beyond fear. He felt alive. The storm outside screamed through the night. The wind howled like a living beast, rattling the stones at the mouth of the cave. Snow hissed against the walls, piling higher and higher. Jacob could hear it even from within the bed of furs, as though the planet itself wanted to bury them alive. Yet inside the warmth of Sarai's arms, the cold could not reach him. Her body radiated heat far beyond any human warmth. It was almost burning, but not painful, more like a fire that wrapped itself around him, driving the frost from his veins. For the first time in days, his shivering slowed, his breath came easier, and his eyes felt heavy with the pull of rest. Still, he could not sleep. Not yet. Jacob lay stiffly, every nerve alive with awareness. Sarai's body was pressed close against his, her arm heavy across his chest. He could hear her breathing, slow and steady, as though the storm outside meant nothing to her. The closeness made his heart pound in a way that had nothing to do with fear. He turned his head slightly, his voice quiet. "Do you do this often? Bring strangers into your bed?" Sarai's violet eyes opened. They glowed faintly in the dark, sharp and unblinking. "Do not mistake this for choice. You carry heat, that is all." Her tone was cold, but Jacob caught something else hidden beneath it. A faint tremor, too small for her to notice herself. He almost smiled, though his lips were cracked. "Maybe so. But it feels like more than that." She frowned, her gaze hardening. "Do not speak foolishness. You are weak. A human, lost in the storm. If not for me, you would already be dead." Jacob met her eyes, his voice steady. "And if not for me, you would still be alone in this storm." The words hung in the air. For a moment, the only sound was the crackle of the dying fire and the distant roar of the wind. Sarai's expression shifted, the faintest flicker of uncertainty breaking through her mask. She turned her face away as if hiding from the truth in his words. Jacob closed his eyes, not to sleep, but to feel. The warmth, the strange safety of another living being close to him, after so many nights of emptiness. He thought of his crew, their laughter on the ship, their voices silenced in the crash. He thought of Earth, of green fields and summer nights. So far away now they felt like dreams. A lump formed in his throat. Without meaning to, a tear slipped from the corner of his eye. Sarai noticed. She shifted, her hand brushing his face. The touch was firm, almost rough, but not unkind. "Why do you cry?" she asked, her voice quieter now. Jacob swallowed hard. "Because I lost everyone. My crew, my family. I thought I'd die out here alone." Her eyes searched his face, and for the first time her voice lost its sharpness. "Alone," she repeated softly, as if the word carried a weight of its own. She pulled him closer then, tighter, pressing his body against hers. He could feel her heartbeat strong and steady against his chest. Her heat flowed into him until it was hard to tell where his body ended and hers began. "Do not think of death. she murmured. Not while I breathe. Jacob's chest tightened. Those words, spoken so firmly, felt like more than a command. They felt like a promise. Time passed slowly. The storm raged. But inside the cocoon of furs and warmth, a fragile peace grew between them. Sarai's breathing deepened, though Jacob sensed she did not truly sleep. He wondered what thoughts kept her awake, what shadows haunted her violet eyes when she stared into the fire. At last, exhaustion claimed him. His body relaxed fully for the first time since the crash. His head rested against her shoulder, his hand brushing against her arm. Before sleep dragged him under, he whispered, barely audible, "Thank you." He thought she would not answer, but after a pause he heard her voice, low and almost trembling. "Sleep, Jacob. Tomorrow you learn to survive." And with that, the human and the banished woman lay together, two exiles bound not by trust or choice, but by the desperate fire of survival. Outside, the storm raged. Inside, a fragile bond began to grow. The days passed slowly on the frozen world. Each morning Jacob woke to the faint warmth of the fire and the steady presence of Sarai beside him. Each day they went out together, wrapped in heavy furs, to hunt strange beasts that roamed the ice fields. Survival became their rhythm: hunt, eat, repair, and endure. But as the weeks went by, Jacob noticed something about Sarai. She was not simply strong. She was restless. Her eyes often wandered to the horizon, staring at the distant alien city that glimmered like ice crystals under the pale sun. Sometimes at night, when she thought Jacob slept, she whispered words in her own language, sharp and aching as if speaking to ghosts. Jacob felt the questions burning inside him, but he stayed quiet at first. He knew trust was a fragile thing, and Sarai guarded hers like a weapon. Still, his curiosity grew heavier each day until it pressed too hard against his chest. One evening, after a long hunt, they sat by the fire in silence. The meat crackled on the flames, filling the cave with the bitter scent of alien flesh. Jacob stared at the sparks rising to the ceiling, his voice finally breaking the quiet. "Why are you out here?" he asked softly. "Why live in this cave alone? What happened to you?" Sarai stiffened. Her hand froze halfway as she turned the meat. Her violet eyes narrowed, not with anger, but with warning. For a long moment she said nothing, and Jacob feared he had pushed too far. At last she spoke, her voice low and hard. "They did not send me here, I chose it." Jacob blinked. "Chose exile?" She looked into the fire, her face lit by the flickering glow. Shadows deepened the sharp lines of her cheeks, but Jacob thought he saw pain buried in her eyes. "Yes. I broke their law. I betrayed their trust." Jacob leaned closer. "What did you do?" Her lips tightened, her breath slow and uneven. When she spoke again, her words carried both defiance and sorrow. "I loved the wrong one." The cave went quiet. The fire popped, and the wind howled faintly outside, but neither of them moved. Jacob's chest tightened. He didn't know the details of her people's customs, but he didn't need to. Her voice alone carried the weight of her story. Sarai turned her face away, her shoulders rigid. "Among my kind, loyalty is everything. Duty, bloodlines, alliances, they bind us tighter than chains. But I broke those chains. I gave my heart where it was forbidden." Jacob swallowed hard. "And for that, they cast you out?" Her jaw clenched. "No, I left. If I had stayed, they would have broken me. Better to freeze in the wild than bow to their judgment." Jacob sat in silence, staring at her. He had thought of her as unshakable, a warrior carved from ice, but now he saw the truth. Beneath that hard shell was someone who had chosen pain over surrender, someone who had chosen loneliness over betrayal of herself. He wanted to say something, anything, but the words tangled in his throat. All he could manage was, "That must have been unbearable." For a moment, Sarai's mask cracked. Her eyes glistened faintly, though no tears fell. She looked at Jacob, and for the first time, her gaze did not burn with command. It trembled with something closer to vulnerability. "You speak as though you understand," she said quietly. Jacob nodded. "I do. I lost my people too. Not by choice, but by accident. And every night I think about how empty it feels, how heavy silence can be." Her breath caught, almost like a gasp, but she quickly turned her face back to the fire. The silence stretched again, heavy but different this time. Not sharp, not cold, but filled with a fragile thread connecting them. After a while, she whispered, so soft Jacob almost didn't hear, "Perhaps we are not so different." Jacob's heart ached at her words. Slowly, he reached across the space between them and placed his hand over hers. Her fingers twitched, as if startled, but she did not pull away. The warmth of her skin met his, and, for that moment, the fire between them was stronger than the fire in the cave. Neither spoke again that night, but when they lay down to sleep, Sarai held him closer than before, not out of command, not out of need for warmth, but out of something deeper. For the first time since her exile, Sarai was not truly alone. And for the first time since the crash, neither was Jacob. The cold season grew harsher with each passing day. The storms lasted longer and the winds grew sharper, cutting through even the thickest furs. Food became harder to find. The animals that roamed the plains vanished into deeper caves, and the ice swallowed every trail. Jacob tried to stay strong. He hunted with Sarai, carried what little they caught, and worked beside her to keep the fire burning. But his body was weaker than hers. He was human, built for warmer lands, not for endless ice. Each night, his cough grew worse. Each morning, it became harder to stand. One morning, as the sun tried to break through the white sky, Jacob followed Sarai across the frozen ridges. The air was so cold it burned his lungs. He carried a spear, though his hands shook too much to hold it steady. His vision blurred, but he forced himself forward. He did not want to slow her down. He did not want to be a burden. Then, without warning, his knees gave way. He collapsed into the snow, coughing hard, blood staining the white beneath him. His chest felt like fire and ice at the same time. "Jacob!" Sarai's voice cut through the storm. She was at his side in seconds, lifting him with surprising strength. Her violet eyes blazed with anger, but her grip trembled. "Foolish human! You think you are strong, but you are not. Without me, you would already be dead." Jacob tried to push himself up, his voice broken and weak. "Maybe. But without me, you'd still be alone." The words struck deeper than any wound. Sarai froze, staring at him as if she had never heard such defiance before. Her lips parted, but no words came. For once, the woman who always commanded, always controlled, looked uncertain. She pulled him up, half carrying him back toward the cave. Her movements were fierce, almost desperate. When they reached the shelter, she laid him down near the fire, covering him with every hide she could find. Her hands pressed against his, chest not gentle but firm, as if she could will the sickness out of him by force alone. "Do not die," she whispered, her voice breaking for the first time. "Not you." Jacob coughed, his breath ragged. His eyes searched her face, and he saw something there he had never expected: fear. Not fear of the cold, not fear of exile, but fear of losing him. His lips curled into a weak smile. "So, you do care?" Her jaw tightened. She looked away, but her hand did not leave his chest. "I do not care," she said sharply. "I need your warmth. That is all." But her voice trembled, and Jacob knew the truth hidden inside her denial. That night, Sarai refused to leave his side. She held him in the furs, pressing her heat into his frail body. She fed him bits of broth she made from scraps of meat and melted snow. Each time his breath caught or his cough deepened, she closed her eyes as though fighting a battle inside herself. Jacob drifted in and out of sleep, his dreams filled with fire and storms. Each time he woke, He felt her arms still, around him, unyielding. Each time her eyes burned with the same silent plea. Live. When dawn came, Jacob's fever broke. He lay weak, but alive, his body damp with sweat. He turned his head slowly and found Sarai watching him. Her face was tired, her eyes red, but her grip on him was steady. "You stayed," he whispered. "I told you," she said firmly. "You will not die while I breathe." A silence stretched between them, heavy with all the words they had not spoken. Jacob wanted to thank her, to tell her what it meant. But he saw in her eyes that she already knew. For Sarai, Jacob was no longer just a human stranger burning hot in the cold. He was something else, something she could not yet name but could no longer deny. And for Jacob, Sarai was no longer just a banished woman keeping him alive. She was the reason he still fought to survive. The sky turned black long before night. Clouds twisted together like angry beasts, swallowing the pale sun. The wind howled louder than Jacob had ever heard, and even Sarai's face tightened when she looked at the horizon. "The great storm," she said, her voice low, almost reverent. "It comes once every cycle. It swallows the land." Jacob felt a shiver run down his spine. The storm he had seen before was nothing compared to this. Already the wind whipped at the cave's entrance like claws trying to tear it open. The fire inside trembled, smoke curling wildly. "We'll stay here," Jacob said quickly. "We'll wait it out." Sarai shook her head. "No. The cave will not hold. The ice will crush it. We must move." Jacob stared at her, fear rising in his chest. "Move out there? We'll be torn apart." Her violet eyes fixed on him, steady but grim. "There is only one place strong enough to withstand this storm. The city." The word hung between them like a blade. Jacob remembered the way she stared at that distant city each night, with longing and pain. He remembered her saying she could never return. "They won't take you back," Jacob said. "You told me yourself. They cast you out." Her jaw tightened. "Yes. And if they see me, they may kill me. But if we stay here, the storm will kill us both. I will not watch you die buried in ice." Jacob's heart pounded. He could see the storm, rolling toward them now, walls of snow and shards of ice stabbing down from the sky. The ground shook with the force of the wind. He knew she was right. If they stayed, they would be crushed. "Then let's go," he said, his voice steadier than he felt. "If they try to keep me, I'll fight for you. I'm not leaving you behind." Sarai's eyes widened slightly, surprise breaking through her hardened mask. For a moment she simply stared at him, as if she could not believe what he had said. Then slowly she reached for his hand. Her grip was firm, unshakable. "Together, then," she whispered. The storm struck before they were ready. The moment they stepped outside, the wind slammed into them with the force of a giant's hand. Snow stung their faces, blinding them. Ice fell from the sky like knives, shattering against the rocks. Jacob clung to Sarai's hand, stumbling as she dragged him forward. Each step felt impossible. The world was nothing but white and black, swirling chaos. Jacob could barely breathe. The air was too sharp, too cold. His body screamed to stop, to curl into the snow and let it end. But Sarai pulled him on, her tall frame cutting through the storm, her strength refusing to yield. "Keep moving," she shouted over the roar. "Do not fall, Jacob." He forced his legs to obey, though each step was agony. His eyes burned, his chest ached, but he held on to her hand like a lifeline. In that storm, she was the only thing that kept him alive. Hours passed like a nightmare. They stumbled across ridges, slid down icy slopes, and pressed against jagged rocks for shelter. Each time Jacob thought he would collapse, Sarai lifted him, her heat burning through the furs they shared. Each time Sarai faltered, Jacob held on tighter, whispering words she did not understand but somehow felt. At last, through the storm's madness, they saw it. The lights of the city. Tall towers of ice and stone, glowing faintly blue, stood like guardians against the storm. Walls rose high, carved into shapes Jacob could not recognize. The sight was both beautiful and terrifying, but Sarai's grip tightened on his hand. He looked at her and saw the conflict in her eyes, fear, pride, and longing all at once. "They will not welcome me," she said, her voice breaking through the wind. "Then they'll welcome me," Jacob answered. His chest burned, his words, raw but true. "And I won't go without you." For a heartbeat, Sarai's steps slowed. She turned to him, snow clinging to her hair, her eyes glowing fiercely in the storm. She looked at him as though seeing him for the first time, not as prey, not as weakness, but as something more. Then, without another word, she pulled him forward, again. Hand in hand, they plunged into the storm's heart, toward the gates of the city that had once cast her out. And though the world roared around them, though death pressed close on every side, Jacob felt something fierce rise in his chest. Not fear, not despair, something stronger. Hope. The storm followed them all the way to the city. Snow raged behind, chasing them like a living beast. When they reached the high walls, Jacob almost fell to his knees from exhaustion. His chest burned, his hands were numb, and his vision blurred. But Sarai held him up, her arms strong around his shoulders. The gates loomed tall, carved with symbols Jacob could not understand. Blue light pulsed through them like veins of frozen fire. Sarai stopped just before the entrance, her breath heavy, her eyes shadowed with pain. "This is where they cast me out," she said, her voice trembling for the first time since Jacob had known her. "I was nothing to them, a shame to my clan. I broke their law. And now, I return only because I must." Jacob looked at her, his heart aching. He could see the storm in her eyes, a storm of memory and regret. Slowly, he took her cold hand in his, squeezing it tightly. "You're not nothing," he said softly. "Not to me. If they cannot see your worth, then they're blind. I'll stand with you, no matter what." For a long moment she stared at him, her face unreadable. Then a faint, fragile smile touched her lips. It was a smile he had never seen before, one that carried no pride, no mask, only gratitude. The gates creaked open. Figures emerged from the glowing light inside. Tall, aliens like Sarai but cloaked in heavy armor, their eyes sharp as blades. They carried spears of ice crystal and moved with deadly grace. When they saw Sarai, their faces hardened. "You." The lead guard stepped forward, his voice cold as the wind. "The Banished one dares return." Sarai straightened, pulling Jacob behind her. Her tall frame towered in defiance, but Jacob could feel the tension in her muscles. "The storm will tear the land apart," she said firmly. "Even your walls will tremble. I come not to beg, but to warn. Let us in, or you risk destruction." The guard's eyes flicked to Jacob, narrowing. "And what is this, a human, a trespasser? You bring prey into our sacred city?" Jacob felt the weight of those stares. He was small among them, fragile. But he stepped forward anyway, his voice rough but steady. "I'm no prey," he said. "I'm alive because of her. She saved me when she had every reason not to. She protected me, fed me, kept me warm when I would have died. If you cast her out again, then you cast me out too. And I will not leave her side." The guards murmured among themselves. Some looked angry, others uncertain. The leader's face tightened, his jaw like stone. "She betrayed our laws. She does not belong." Jacob's voice rose, stronger now, filled with a fire he didn't know he carried. "Maybe your laws are wrong. Maybe you were afraid of her strength, afraid of her heart. But I've seen her. I know her. She is braver than any of you. If you cannot accept her, then you do not deserve her." The storm crashed against the walls then, making the ground shake. Ice shards slammed into the gates, cracking them. The guards turned, fear flashing in their eyes. The great storm was here, stronger than ever. For the first time, they hesitated. Sarai looked at Jacob, stunned. His words had cut through where her strength could not. She had always carried her exile as shame, but now, through him, She saw it as something else. A wound, yes, but also a proof of survival. The leader's gaze lingered on Jacob, then on Sarai. Finally, he raised his hand. "Open the gates," he commanded.